And welcome to Tiki Man and the Viking podcast. He is Tiki Man.
I'm H.B. Burlow, the historical crime fiction author of the Ark City Confidential Chronicles and the Wichita Chronicles, and not to mention a fine baker in his own right. He is the Viking.
I am William Bryan Johnson, author of Hell to Pay, The Dark Cry of Aristid, and Middle-Aged Man in a Trash Can.
Love that book. Love that book.
Can we clap for you guys?
Sure.
Yeah.
And we have guests today.
We have guests today. We're going back and doing an old school thing called a round table, and we decided to delve into the world of verse. We have two special guests.
We have Ann Baker Brin, has two middle names, not just the two names of normal people. It was her mom's idea, and she forgot. By day, she has been a nonprofit administrative assistant for decades. By night, she likes to expose the other side of her brain to creative endeavors in an attempt to reverse the soul-strangling efforts of the red tape. Where she falls on a variety of spectrums depends on the hour. Let's just enjoy the mystery. She has resided in Indiana and Kansas and was honored to be named 2023 Kansas Author Club Poet of the Year. Her actual state of mind is one with doggies, chocolate, celestial objects, and song lyrics.
I had a whole chocolate bar on the way here.
Was it any good?
Oh my gosh, it was so good.
Which one?
It was from Watermark, and I think they get theirs made by like Sweet Grannies or something like that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Dark chocolate.
And her portfolio is at juliebrin.org.
Now, we also have past Poet Laureate of Kansas from 2017 to 2019, Kevin Rabas, teaches at Emporia State University, where he directs the creative writing program and the Donald Reichert Center for Publishing and the Literary Arts. He has 16 books, including Lisa's Flying Electric Piano, a Kansas Notable Book, and Nelson Poetry Book Award winner. Thank you to both for joining us. We appreciate it. When I think about poetry, I'm reminded of a quote by the French philosopher Blaise Pascal, who said, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, that I wrote this letter long because I didn't have the time to make it short. That seems to be thematic of poets. Just for starters, could you two identify your process from inspiration to writing to editing? What is it like to write a poem?
Okay. I guess I'll go first. So I keep a notebook. It's a journal that I get usually at Walmart, and it has dots, and I write about 3 to 60 sketches a day. And these are haiku-like, and they're also more leaning towards Jack Kerouac's, he called them American Pops, which are kind of haiku-based. They are very haiku-based. And I write those as a warm-up every day, sometimes on the way to work. My partner Katie drives, and while she's driving, I write them, and on the way back home, I drive, and maybe she'll write. And so that's what I do to keep the rust off the saw. And then sometimes a longer piece will come out of one of those American Pops, and sometimes it'll be a short story. I also bring a larger notebook. It's a blank drawing pad, and I open that up landscape as well, and I write longer pieces in it when I intentionally want to write a short story or the beginning of a novel. Or some section in a novel, I use this larger pad. And so then I go back and type. I'm about 16 journals behind, but I do pick and choose from those two. But I used to religiously type them in every evening, what I'd written during the day. And I have about 1,500 pages of those typed entries from just the journals, which no one may ever see, but that's my practice.
What percentage do you think you can estimate of all of these American Pops wind up as a finished piece, whether it's a poem or short story?
Maybe 1 out of 100.
Wow.
But I do share some of them with friends. Like I'll take a picture of the page and send it over Facebook Messenger or a text, or I'll just rip it out of the journal. I'll take and recopy it and rip it out and mail it to a friend.
That's cool.
That's impressive. Well, it's like having leftovers you want to share. You don't want to just throw them out.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. What about you, Julie? Where's your
Oh,
inspiration
wow.
come
This
from?
is why Kevin is Poet Laureate Emeritus, because he has a process. My process is less disciplined, but it does involve paper and notebooks everywhere. So I wish y'all could see this. I wish you had video. This is a very important notebook that I always keep in my purse. It fits in my purse. The process of putting the stickers on it, very important. It's got to have pockets inside it as well to keep all my stuff, my sticky notes and flags and things like that. So I keep a notebook in my purse, by the bedside, in the bathroom, wherever, next to the rocking chair where I hang out. I'm usually always interrupted by my dogs or distracted by something else. But yes, there are scraps of verses being written every so often as I'm inspired. The only times I've really had discipline have been like during National Poetry Month. So that's coming up in April.
Right.
And that's when if I say this out loud, I'm going to have to do it now. But I have done it in the past, just a poem a day, even if it's a haiku or a tanka or something like that, a micropoem, based on a prompt that I'll find online or something. Of course, I keep sometimes in the car when I'm inspired. I have been known, don't tell anyone, but to actually write while I'm driving, or to find the voice app, do that sort of thing.
I use voice app too sometimes when I'm on those long drives. I'm like, oh, got an idea.
Yeah, yep.
I always used to say that if I couldn't remember it, it wasn't worthwhile, which was great 20, 30 years ago. But now that I'm pushing 64,
What?
I have to write stuff down. Like even this meeting today, I had to write that down. So you have your inspiration, you have your notebooks, you have your pops. What's next? Where do you go from there? How do you decide one out of every 100, Kevin, that one is the one that's going to move forward? What pops out at you, no pun intended, from the page that makes you say, I got to run with this?
Right. I go for things that are conversational, but also often imagistic, meaning using the five senses. And then does it pass the so what test? Is it interesting to other people? And so, my dad worked construction all of his working life. And could my dad read this and understand it and appreciate it? That's the first litmus test for me. And then, as I'm flipping through the book, does it catch my attention? Is it diary like with fire, or is it diary like, who cares? So, that's probably how I go about it. And often, as I'm writing something small, it will naturally emerge to become something larger. Like maybe you're making an ashtray in pottery, but then it becomes a vase, and you're like, I'm just going to let it keep becoming a vase.
Okay.
Now, is there any time that you would take what do you call it, so what?
Yeah, I might go back. So what might be interesting. And I guess if I have, when I have readers, I can pitch them to them and they will tell me, did this move me? Did this move you?
Now, when you do books, do you go for a theme, or are you just kind of doing this is what I have at this time?
It goes both ways. Sometimes I'll have a kind of hodgepodge of things, like maybe a desk that you've just scattered some papers and knickknacks on, and you'll pick the things that are alike and bring them together, and those will be chapters: nature, romance, jazz, etc. Or I might get on a kick and write only about that for a while. So I wrote about 200 or 300 of these pops about Charlie Parker, one of his recordings that was hard to get, and I just focused on that during that time, and they were all about that. Will anybody understand or enjoy them? Hard to say, but I tried to pick the ones that would move the ordinary person, so to speak, and that became the mission. So I've gone at it both ways, the pantser and the planner.
Okay.
So there is that analogy for poets as well, too, I guess.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how about yourself? Once you've got these scraps and that thick notebook there, what do you pick from to choose?
So deadlines are what drive my decision.
Okay.
I try to, when there are, regional or local contests or journals, especially the deadline's coming up. Pretty much the night before the deadline, I'll go back through my stuff and say, okay, even if it's things that have been rejected before, that's kind of like to me, oh yeah, let's see about that, challenge accepted. I'm going to go ahead and submit this anyway somewhere else, tweak it a little bit. I really like the theme deadlines, so not just poetry, but like creative nonfiction that 105 Meadowlark Reader does. They'll have a theme like bicycles or food or intersection. So sometimes they're concrete, sometimes they're, more nebulous. Sometimes those will inspire me and really wanting to be in those same journals as my peers too. So.
That can be very rewarding. Tell us more about the 105 Meadowlark Reader. What's that all about?
So Meadowlark Press out of Emporia has 2 or 3 of those a year. Is that right? Themed. They are creative nonfiction for and by Kansans or people with Kansas connections. Okay. So part of the story needs to take place in Kansas, needs to reference it as well. And even the artist bios, they would like you to kind of submit something about your location, what you like about it, or what's unique to your location in Kansas. And they call it 105 Meadowlark Reader because of the 105 counties in Kansas. And their goal is to get something from every county eventually. And so I don't know how they canvass the state to get those submissions, but they change up their theme every time, and they give kind of plenty of time to get those stories turned in. So.
I think something like that actually has the ability to show people, there are some talented people in the state of Kansas, mm-hmm. and everybody's not limited to the East Coast or the West Coast or anything in that regard. When did you become a poet? That's a weird question. When did you realize that poetry was your bag? You loved writing poems. When did it first hit you?
Right. I can go first again. So, when it comes to writing in general, my mom was a journalist. And so she worked for a local paper. And when I was about 8 years old, she would sling the strap of the tape recorder around my neck and have me hold the microphone for people at City Hall or people at a fire or whatever. So she brought me along, and I was the story recorder, quite literally. So she brought me into this calling, profession, trade, whatever. So that's how that started for me. When it comes to poetry specifically, it's a sad story, but I'd written poems and stories pretty seriously for quite some time. And I was knocked down in a pickup basketball game in 1999. And as part of my recovery, I wrote poems daily. And not many of them were so-called good in quotation marks, but it was part of my healing process. And I leaned into poetry again. I was actually 2 weeks before taking the LSAT to go to law school when I got knocked down. I thought I would support my writing habit as a lawyer. But then, I couldn't take the LSAT to save my life. I couldn't do the logic problems at all at that point. And so I just stuck with the poetry book manuscript and kept writing it. And about 6 to 8 years later, it hit. But I revised it and mercilessly and photocopied it everywhere I worked and showed it to folks and picked the ones that spoke to other people most, and that became Bird's Horn after Charlie Parker's Plastic Saxophone, which is at the American Jazz Museum, which is one of the places I was volunteering as I was recovering, because I wanted to see other people and do some sort of work, but I couldn't sustain an 8-hour day at that time.
Was that the one that I used for the quartet recording?
I think I did use that for, yeah.
Because I remember it's Charles Mingus, Dizzy Gillespie, and it was like one concert and Mingus was recording, and I think there was a ball game going on, so there was very few people at the concert, and it's like
Wow.
This is the all-stars of jazz. What are you doing? Ball game in the 50s. That's more important, I guess, you know.
Yeah,
Amazing.
live at Massey Hall in Canada.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yourself? When did that first impulse hit you?
Wow, that's really funny. I love how Kevin went back to his childhood because I think it was probably then for me as well. My mother was an educator, but for me it was more about playing school, but making up stories with my brother. And now I realize that basically I was a plagiarist because we would, make stories about Mickey and Minnie Mouse go to the mountains and ride roller coasters and stuff like that. So... or maybe it's fan fiction. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll call it fan
Call it
fiction.
fan fiction.
You started it, yeah.
I did a ton of Star Wars fan fiction when I was younger.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. But the label poet, the label author, like I never thought of myself as either for a long time. In fact, I didn't even join Kansas Authors Club for a long time because it's like I'm not really an author. And it sounds like a club, but hey, they're really nice people. Everybody should who likes to write. Little commercial for those folks. Come on in. We're nice. We're not clubby, I promise.
If I'm not mistaken, Kansas Authors Club is the oldest writing organization in the state of Kansas and one of the oldest in the country.
Yeah, over 100 years or so.
Yeah.
I forget. And for a long time, I would call my pieces poetry-like substances because I didn't want to say this is a poem, but other people started calling me that before I did, in the last few years because I've kind of been submitting stuff for a long time way back in college, which was approximately 42 million years ago, and it was awful, and I really hope all of those copies are destroyed. But yeah, so
Trying
just
to remember what era
submitting
that was.
Pleistocene.
Yeah. Paleozoic? I don't know. Not a history buff or geologist or any of that.
So how did you start sending stuff out to other people, letting your stuff be known versus, isn't it one problem with a lot of writers is we tend to operate in a vacuum and we tend not to put stuff out there. So what was kind of your first steps on getting stuff out to people?
To play with the metaphor, it is kind of Paleolithic, but once I had a job where the mail is free, I would stamp a self-addressed stamped envelope and put it inside of an envelope and then put 3 to 6 poems in there and let my job pay for the other stamps. And I sent out one envelope every work week day. So one envelope Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So 5 envelopes would go out each week. I sent them to a post office box that was across the street from a coffee shop. So I'd go there and open up the post office box and out would come like confetti all these rejection letters. I'd get myself a piece of cake and I would open them all. And once in a while there'd be a yes, and once in a long while, there'd be a journal inside, too, that had my stuff in it. But I was 1 for 47. That was my average for years.
Oh, wow.
1 out of 47. It's a little bit better now, but that was it. I calculated. It was math.
What flavor cake goes with rejection the best?
Chocolate cake.
Oh,
chocolate
yes.
cake.
Yeah.
I just love the concept of the self-addressed stamped envelope, which is basically you paying to be rejected. It's like, because I still have mine from the early 90s. And I think you should keep them as a reminder of what you've been through. But nowadays, you send off an email and you get an email back, and no harm, no foul.
And I had to laugh about the rejection food because when I go on a chase and, like, let's say I spend 2 hours to go there and it fails, I'll go get a fill shake. Because no matter what, at least I got a shake out of it. So, and I'll sometimes even take pictures of my fill shake and post it. But
How about yourself?
I love it.
When did you start sending things out? And what do you do now?
In high school, I think, but really when I started doing it a little more seriously, so this is kind of wacky. I am a transplant to Kansas from Indiana, and the reason I ended up here is because I didn't know what to do with my life, and I decided to join a volunteer service for 1 year. I was trying to go to Chicago. I was trying to get placed, somewhere closer to Indiana, closer to home. But I thought, okay, Kansas, I'll take a nonprofit job there for 1 year. It's just 1 year. That was, that was a long, long time ago. I'm still in Kansas.
It's kind of like Book of Mormon.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, sort of like that. But
you get to go to Florida and came here.
It was a volunteer position and very little money. I entertained myself by, getting super focused on writing and submitting to journals and going to the library. And they had, was it the Writer's Guide or to getting published or whatever, the Poet's Guide. And I was so excited when I could buy one of those for the first time, when I could actually afford one. But it was cool to find it in the library. And yeah, I did the self-addressed stamped envelope thing too. And that's when I first learned about chapbooks, and I thought, oh, I could do a chapbook, but instead I did kind of a trifold brochure and did some art with it, and that became kind of my version of a chapbook, so I could mail it out, mostly to my friends and family who were still in Indiana, so it was cheaper to mail, that sort of thing. It was just a letter, basically. So yeah, it's been a couple decades, maybe more than that, but
time flies quickly. Influences. I mean, there's not any kind of writer around who doesn't have some kind of influences. You, Kevin, mentioned Kerouac's American Pops. What other poets inspired you initially? You may have developed and moved on from them, but who were your starter kid?
So I have a trilogy that still pretty much holds. Kim Antonisio, Tim Siebels, and Thomas Lux. And Kim Antonisio's work I found at City Lights Books in San Francisco. I went in and started with A and pulled out Tell Me from the bookshelf at City Lights. And I said, this is an amazing book. I'm going to find this person and see if they will teach me. And that's what happened.
Wow.
I played in a blues band with Kim Antonisio for a few nights, and she was my teacher at Goddard College, which is low residency. I applied there just to study with her, and she changed my world. She opened the horizons of the way I could look at poetry, and so that worked out. Now, there are other folks that I wanted to study with, Yusuf Komunyakaa, etc., who I could not get in the same room as, but Kim Antonisio really made me a better poet. Maybe even made me a poet in underlined. Tim Siebels is my favorite poet reading out, a speaker of his poetry. Also has wonderful poetry, including the best basketball poem I've ever read called To Brothers Everywhere. I have talked to him a number of times, and he's also still one of my heroes. Tom Lux died about a decade ago, I guess it is now, but also had a chiseled style. One of his most famous poems, Refrigerator, and it has a date on it too. I think he revised 47 times.
What?
Wow.
It's also very conversational. I really didn't get his poetry until I heard him read out loud, and I was like, wow, this is how this is supposed to be experienced. And so also a brilliant teacher. So those are my top three living poets until Tom Lux died a little while ago. There are so many others. I mean, like when it comes to jazz poets, the tradition with folks like Langston Hughes, Amiri Baraka, Kerouac, et cetera, and Kevin Young, who is also one of my heroes, even though he's a little younger than me. Probably the most important jazz poet living in America. And so I have a lot of heroes, but I have to go back to my triumvirate of Kim Antonisio, Tom Lux, and Tim Siebels as my influences. They're very different, but they kind of focus the sort of things that I do and the things I want to do through their own verse.
I think I actually heard Tim Siebels in Boston in the early 90s, because I was part of the whole Boston poetry scene, and I was writing Shakespearean-type sonnets and doing slam poetry.
Cool.
Yeah, back in those days, I'd let the hair down and come across as the bard from Boston, as one guy referred to me. Yeah.
Cool.
I had some success.
There's so many things going in my head right now and so many sensors going off.
Yeah.
What did you play musically?
I play drums. I still do. I have a gig in a week in Peabody. It's hot jazz, like Paris jazz, and some other things. And so I still play out. I don't make enough to live off of, but when I was in Kansas City, I almost paid my rent as a jazz musician. I did a few other things too. So I used to play a lot, and I've still got my drums, knock on wood. So I play. It's one of my major passions. Like if they had to say, what can you take away from your life? Drumming is not going to go away, neither is poetry.
Have you ever written any music?
I have. I wrote a jazz tune called Blue Monk Come Monday, which is kind of an inversion of the tune called Blue Monk by Thelonious Monk.
Right.
I don't know where it is. I could probably dink it out on the piano. I was studying with Dennis Wilson, who was second trombone to Slide Hampton for the Basie Band and one of the composers for the Basie Band. And he took me on, strangely enough, as a drummer to learn composition for a semester as an independent study, and I wrote that tune and some other stuff. It's not really my bag right now, but I listen a lot and kind of sing in the shower, and so I can still come up with stuff, but I don't really share it with anyone else.
It all just goes down the drain.
Dun-dun-dun.
As a drummer would say. What about you, Julie? Who inspired you?
So, growing up, I think it was probably just song lyrics. I grew up on a farm in the middle of Indiana, and we had, 3 stations that I got to listen to. So I don't know. I wasn't very well read, and I still can probably say the same thing, sadly. I'm a pretty slow reader. But these days, it's really a lot of Kansas poets, definitely Kevin.
Oh, nice.
There are so many great... Now that I'm involved in Kansas Authors Club, I could spend the rest of my life only buying Kansas author books and reading those. There are just so many. April Pamatiski. I could keep going and naming names of Janice, Northerns, Wesker Medina, of course, Tracy Brimhall, all the Kansas Poet Laureates, of course. So I'm really focusing more on contemporary, peers. But, and of course, the things that we needed to read in school. But I don't know that those necessarily inspire my work. It's the voices in my head.
Right.
That's what inspires my work, too.
Yeah, and he's not really a poet, but yeah, he's got voices in his head.
And you guys have a event coming up in Botanica, right, in Wichita?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For National Poetry Month, they were kind enough to invite us to participate. So the next 4 Wednesdays, actually the first 4 Wednesdays in April, 4 Wednesdays in April, 6 to 8 p.m. Going to shake it up with some readings and some hands-on activities for people who are coming in, like a group poem exercise. Janice Northerns really is the one who came up with a lot of the projects. She's kind of our writers in community. Janice and Tammy Hayter, they do a lot of open mics and things like that. So, yeah,
that's a nice thing. I mean, there's plenty of open mics in any community you go to, but something like this, which seems to be a partnership with Botanica, which is the Wichita Gardens. It's just, I like when things of that nature happen, when there's that confluence. Epistrophe, which is where I participated with Kevin, that's where I first met him, was a situation where poets would read their piece. There was a quartet, I believe,
that sounds right,
of musicians, and then you would read it again where they would improv to your poem after they heard it the first time. And that was the Beats back in the 50s. That's what they did all the time. And now that one event showed once again a merging between 2 art forms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember early on I went to our coffee house in Riverside to do their open mic nights and test pieces and things like that.
Did you see me there? I was there a couple of times.
It was probably before we knew each other.
No. We have a debate about how far back we go. True. Because we're both getting older and forgetful.
I probably saw you at say that 7 times fast.
Epistrophe.
That, yes.
Right, yeah.
I did that as well. So that was really cool to have.
Stay tuned for part 2 coming soon. Tiki Man and the Viking Podcast brought to you by Rumination of Thunder Media. The following intro and outro music was used for this media project. The music Find Them by Alexander Nakrata. Free download from filmmusic.io. License Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International.